talking about. Is everyone bad? I guess is the main topic of discussion. Basically, the question that's been floated around in the Reddit, which is basically, are people just bad at the game? And what are the reasons behind people being bad at the game? I mean, I think a lot of people take some offense anytime I make a video that has to do anything with like, hey, this is their fault or this is this person's fault. Not universally, but like the moment someone hears like, hey, this is your fault for this situation, they're like, unsubscribe, turn off, close, like skip. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it a little bit about why we're at this stage in life. Like why is this happening? So to begin, the one I saw, the Reddit post I saw was, we've come full circle on gearing again. The hardest content should reward the best gear. Everyone should have the opportunity to scale into content. Hello everybody, Future Sean. Just wanted to clarify this point that I was making here. Basically, the first point says that the hardest content should give the best gear, but then the second point says that easier content should allow you to outscale the harder content. So by saying that, essentially you're saying that the easiest content should give the best gear. So these points become antithetical to one another, because you're saying that essentially Delve's content should provide better gear than Mythic Plus content, when in reality it should work obviously in a more linear progression scale system, meaning that the harder the content gets, the harder the actual, or the better the gear you get from that content. So just wanted to clarify that point. Sorry. Back to the video. So players that are good enough to get mythic gear are currently getting mythic gear. Players that are not good enough to get mythic gear are not. That's how it should be. I will admit that Mythic Plus is rough at the moment and needs tuning, but that doesn't mean every player should be able to step into a plus 10 after turning run. Should everybody be able to get a certain threshold of gear and still be bad? I think honestly this is a classic pastime. This is something that a lot of vanilla players probably are familiar with. Sometimes the bad person gets a piece of gear. I think we all wish that this was the case, that the people who are bad don't get the gear, but this is literally it's built into the coding of WoW. People who are bad are simply going to get the gear because someone's going to carry you. Somebody's going to get by. Someone's not going to notice that you're bad, and you're going to get into the groups and you're going to get it. So I don't think necessarily that you could say that, well, people who are bad shouldn't get gear. I do agree, however, that creating a system that basically allows you to skip over that is a bit muddled in a situation, like a bit of a mess of a situation, because it's like a lot of people are bragging right now, for example, that delves are content that allow you to basically get harder content for yourself, but not have to group with anybody else. And then a lot of people are like, well, I did delves content, now I don't have to do mythics whatsoever. Like a subtle brag in some sort of way. I honestly feel like part of me says that delves should cut off at a certain mythics and go no higher. So as long as that's always the case, I'm okay with it. Should you be able to go from delves, I guess is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, should you be able to go from delves to raiding content? Like, should there have to be an in-between? Right now, it kind of feels like that's the case, that you can basically do delves and get into raids. No problem. I think there's too many things in the game currently that simply allow you to get gear that's a bit beyond what you're currently accessing. But I think the reason why is because previously you would get that from like how you got your pre-bis was from doing like dungeon content, etc. But often getting like the highest gear that you could, sometimes even in like even over raid up until a certain point, was through other additional easier content. So some required a lot of farming, some required a lot of money, some required a lot of materials, which cost a lot of money. So it's just another route for people to get gear. I miss the way it used to be with how you used to get gear. I mean, to me, I feel like it should just scale naturally. You should be able to do the hardest dungeon content before progressing into mythics to prep you for mythics. You should be able to do the middle to higher mythics content to get you into the raiding content, and so on and so forth. I like it when it's a linear progression versus basically you can skip over if you do enough of lower level content. It's just the way I think. I understand coming from a different perspective, but I think having more of a linear progression just makes more sense. I guess I don't mind people getting like 1 or 2 pieces of gear that's like, it's like, oh, you know, like that was a random drop and it was really decent. That's totally fine. But nowadays it just kind of feels like any content you do will get you good content. I mean, for 2 weeks straight, I was getting my world quest gear was getting me better gear than mythics and raiding content. Like I felt like I had to do much harder, harder difficulty of content in order to get much better gear, which is silly because considering delves are so easy. So it's like it didn't make sense to me, at least. So leading into the next post, which is that the problem with the game is that people are bad at it. So some people might get their feelings hurt, but seriously, some of the people are just bad at the game. There are times that +5, +6, +7 keys where people don't know the mechanics of the dungeons, heroic raids, where people just stand in the shit they're not supposed to. People just brainlessly smashing their DPS keys and doing middling DPS at the best, and then turn around and blame the tank or the healer for the problem. It's nuts. Hugging feels unviable. The average WoW player is not good at the game. People just like to think they're better than they are because self-reflection is hard. Stop breaking keys and stop wasting people's time. I think I understand where this comes from, but ultimately comes from a position of like sometimes you just get shitty groups. Be thankful that it doesn't take nearly as much time as it used to. Does it suck? Yes, but imagine how it used to be, where it's you'd make a group and nobody was near the area, and it would take forever for just to get a couple people there. You'd summon everybody, you get into the group, and then you can't clear boss 2. And you would just have to smash your face into it until someone would leave, and you're just like, well, we can't remake this group. At least with some of these, you can remake the groups. Now, it is hard to make groups for everybody besides tanks, which feels great for me as a tank, ultimately. But it sucks for everybody else. But I feel like this comes from a position of like being mad at people leaving keys. And I get that. I totally get that. But all you can do is just be like, give them like a deserter thing so they can't make another group, I guess. But people who leave groups are just mad at themselves anyways. Like they're projecting any sort of anger they have anyways on other people. So that's on them. I think what you need to do is stop focusing on the people who break keys and focus on the people who stay in the key and just want to keep on going. Make it easier for those people to recover. There's plenty of ways to either merge groups or pause a key so people can rejoin and fix things. I don't think pausing a key is going to break it. That might be an idiotic idea. That's just the way I think about it. But I think we need to stop focusing about the people who are bad and just focus on the people who are just trying to keep the group alive. Ultimately, is it bad being good at this game since it requires outside resources and programs? I've been playing WoW since TBC, and I always remember Cataclysm was the moment I finally got good. By that I mean I learned about add-ons. Took you that fucking long. Looking up talent builder rotations and something. I played WoW for over 2 years. By that point, many different classes at max level and could do mechanics easy enough, but had terrible damage healing performance because I didn't know what talents and spells to use and what order. You guys remember like before, like how hard it was to like do add-ons correctly, etc.? It wasn't hard. It was just like, now that it's instantaneous, it's like I don't think I could ever go back to like going into my files and like putting them in there. I feel like add-ons were so much more volatile too. They always caused so many issues. Now they're like stable as long as like its current patch, etc. It's just crazy. This is what I find controversial about WoW. Not that to not be a burden to your team is essentially required to download add-ons or use programs and resources that are completely outside of the game. As an MMO, there's an element of sharing information that's intrinsic to the game genre, and I think things like BIS lists and talent builds fall under that. But outside programs like CurseForge and WeCore as being essentially mandatory to perform at any level above Raid Finder. Part of the community aspect or a sign of bad game design. I just did a raid. I just did a raid, normal raid, of course, but literally 0 wipes up until a certain boss, and then 1 wipe, everyone was done. People don't like learning on the job anymore. They don't like figuring it out. They don't like overcoming to figure stuff out, and that to me is a problem. I feel like back in the day, the hardest thing you had to deal with wasn't people wanting to deal with it, like to try and try again. It was people who would do stuff differently, and you would learn a bad way of doing things, and then you would learn the right way of doing things, and then you would have bad habits. Nowadays, you don't even have a chance to establish bad habits because the moment you die, they quit. So it's just like, whenever you figure it out, you're like, oh, I guess we figured it out. But then again, you could have just gone through the fight without experiencing the mechanics. Ultimately, I think it kind of leads to the sign of bad game design. I think that requiring add-ons to a degree at least is a fault of the game. They know things like deadly boss mods exist. The reason why deadly boss mods exist is because it is not obvious when certain mechanics are happening. So it requires add-ons for you to kind of understand what's going on. So the game does a piss poor job of relaying mechanics and telling you what's going to happen when it happens. And I don't think you should have to get a WoW degree outside of WoW to do a boss fight. I think you should be able to understand what's going on by what's being projected in the game. And if at all possible, you show people by learning. People can learn by failing. That's totally fine. But if you're not providing enough in the game, whereas people can go, oh, I can see where I messed up, so I'm going to do that better next time, then people never learn. Especially when the nature of a lot of grouping nowadays is pugging. So I think the game needs to do a better job of that. And that's honestly, let's say like 70% their fault. Now, is part of it laziness? Sure, I think that's entirely possible. But I don't think that's necessarily just players' faults. So is it a bad thing, bad that being good at this game requires outside resources programs? I think yes. I think it's definitely not a good thing. I think that the game should be understandable at the hardest levels of content by either trial and error, or it should be obvious, like projectable what's happening, so you know how to react in some sort of way. So whether that's, like the game reacting to something happening, like showing you like, hey, these players, flashing, like these are the who you need to dispel. Like if I need to get something that tells me when to interrupt, but I can't tell obviously who I'm supposed to interrupt without an add-on, then that's kind of unfortunate. I think it should be like, it shouldn't take tons of time or practice to figure that out. I think it should be obvious what's supposed to happen and where you mess up. So that's just my thoughts on it. I mean, I understand that everyone's gonna have different opinions of this. A lot of people nowadays are so used to the add-ons, and it's like all they know. So it's like how can you blame players for that, for kind of taking that perspective? It's just kind of the way it is. So what are your thoughts on this? What do you feel like is the biggest thing holding back players currently in end game level content? So like the higher keys, plus 10s, etc., and maybe some of the higher level rating content as well. To me, ultimately, it's poor game design, and then people reacting to poor game design by being more restrictive on who they group with and more or less lenient with their time. So it's kind of like the game design leads to people's behaviors, and those behaviors are a reaction to the game around them. So it's like, Art is a representation of the current times surrounding that artist and their environments. So players are reacting to their environments, and that environment is toxic and punishing to people who are learning. And it doesn't carry people into a level of understanding. It just goes like, hey, you're being punished and you're not going to figure out why. So that's the unfortunate side of things, but that's all I got to say. Hope you liked the video. Subscribe to the page if you liked it. Like the video if you liked it. And of course, comment with what you think might be the way to fix something like this. But until next time, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.